You just made $30 million, you bypass the yacht. Boats feel slow, instead you buy a jet, a $25 million Gulfstream, the kind that can fly from New York to Dubai without a single stop. You imagine total freedom. Wheels up whenever you want, landing wherever you want, no schedules, and no rules. But right now, at this exact second, roughly 40% of all private jets in the sky are flying completely empty. No passengers, no purpose except getting the plane somewhere else. The industry calls it a deadhead flight, and once you own a jet, deadheading isn't something that happens to other people's planes. It happens to yours, and you're the one paying for a multi-million-dollar ghost flight. See, your $25 million toy legally cannot fly itself. Unlike a supercar, aviation law requires 2 qualified pilots in that cockpit at all times, not 1. Before your jet ever leaves the ground, you have to add 2 senior pilots to your permanent payroll, commanding salaries between $150,000 and $300,000 each annually. That is 2 people on permanent payroll before the jet has left the hangar once. The real trap springs on your very first trip. You fly from New York to Aspen for a ski weekend. You land, your jet sits at the airport, and at the end of the weekend you fly home. Except the jet doesn't always wait for you. If airport parking fees are too high, or your pilots hit their legal duty hour limits, that aircraft flies right back to its home base without you on it. It burns the exact same fuel, uses the exact same engine hours, and costs the exact same amount of money as if you were sitting in the cabin. You're paying full price for a flight nobody is taking. It gets worse. The aviation industry has built an entire business out of your jet's emptiness. An entire marketplace exists where charter companies actively scrape data on these empty repositioning flights and sell those seats to total strangers at discounts of 25 to 75% off normal rates. Someone you have never met could be flying across the country on a seat aboard your private jet for a fraction of the cost because your empty flight is quietly subsidizing a stranger's vacation. And while it is sitting empty, the financial bleeding never stops. Heavy jets cost $4,000 to over $7,600 per flight hour to operate, covering fuel, maintenance reserves, landing fees, and crew costs combined. A single 5-hour flight can cost $20,000 to $38,000 before you have even stepped off the plane. Parking the jet requires a covered hangar to protect it from weather and keep the electronics functioning. At a major metro airport, that is $2,000 to $8,000 a month, and in premium locations, hangar fees alone can exceed $200,000 a year. Then comes the maintenance. You might think maintenance means fixing things when they break, but the aviation standard is totally different. Routine maintenance typically runs 5 to 10% of the aircraft's total value. Every single year, regardless of whether anything is actually broken. On a $25 million jet, that is $1,250,000 to $2,500,000 a year just in scheduled maintenance reserves. Add an annual insurance bill of $40,000 to $150,000, and the baseline cost of simply owning the asset is staggering. 6 months in, the bills are piling up and the math finally hits you. The obvious solution presents itself: charter the jet out to other people when you're not using it and let that income offset your costs. This is where the trap snaps shut. To legally charter your aircraft to paying passengers, you have to place it under a commercial operating certificate. Welcome to a nightmare of legal compliance, massive insurance hikes, and heavy management fees. Industry data shows that charter income typically offsets only 20 to 40% of your annual fixed costs. It does not eliminate them. You haven't found a way out. You have just added a complicated part-time business on top of an already bleeding asset. The industry consensus is blunt about this. Jet ownership only becomes more cost-effective than chartering if you fly somewhere between 200 and 400 hours a year. That is roughly 1 flight every single week, year-round. Fly less than 150 hours a year, which describes almost everyone who isn't running a corporation out of the cockpit, and chartering or fractional ownership would have cost you significantly less. Worse yet, this is not an appreciating asset. Private jets typically lose 10 to 15% of their value in the first year alone. Then another 5 to 10% every year after that. A $25 million jet can shed 30 to 50% of its value within 5 to 10 years, completely independent of how well you maintain it. When you look at the final 5-year financial autopsy, the numbers are devastating. You bought the jet for $25 million. 5 years of crew, hangar, insurance, and maintenance cost you roughly $7,500,000 to $12,500,000 in fixed costs alone. Fuel and flight hour costs across moderate use add another $1 million to $2 million. When you finally decide to cut your losses after 5 years, you sell the aircraft for around $14 million. Total cash vanished, somewhere between $19,500,000 and $24,500,000. All to own something that half the time it is in the sky is flying completely empty anyway. You didn't buy a $25 million jet. You bought the obligation to spend roughly $2 million a year keeping 2 pilots on call for a plane that statistically somewhere in the world at this exact moment is more likely to be flying empty than flying full. The freedom was never free. Somebody was always going to pay for that empty seat. It just turned out to be you.